Record. Here we go.
All right, we're back.
All right, the Academy is back. Harry's course is over for now, and we took a little break, and now we're back for the real learning.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason why I don't know, there were probably a few reasons why we took a short hiatus, but one was, at least from my perspective, we got busy with the course, but I was thinking, well, we'll give it a rest for a while. We'll come back in 2, 3, 4 months, and we won't be talking about, COVID or the vaccines anymore.
Yeah.
And then we'll be able to get back to like real life. But actually, we see how that's going.
Yeah. Yep. It's Groundhog Day type stuff. It's like we go around and around, and even the discussions. You mentioned something on Twitter to me. I don't even remember what the details were, but maybe like rapid testing or something. And you're like, oh, this is back again. Like, weren't we here? This is like, and these are like not even deep into the pandemic. This is like February 2020 type conversations coming back around again. And yeah, I mean, obviously things are sort of haven't moved forward and are just kind of, the tension is growing and building and the rhetoric is evolving. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. One thing is that I've almost entirely, maybe even last time we talked, I mentioned a little about this. I've almost entirely tuned out the actual data, what they're saying is the data. Now I've almost like, I don't know, and I can't look. I can't devote that mental space anymore. So like, what are you seeing and what are you experiencing?
And I'm not looking at the data. I mean, I never really looked at the data. I mean, I actually started actually, to some extent, I just started looking at data, very, very low level data recently, which is like the daily case count, which is actually just the graph of the case count. Is it going up? Because just for my own kind of like, well, are things going to get shut down again? If I want to make some certain decisions I'm trying to make, might actually be hinging on whether or not that's going to happen. But as far as the actual data, I mean, it was never reliable in the first place, and now and I think that's the ultimate kind of story here, which is how easy it is to lose trust, and then you never get it back. And that's what's happened. So the data it might be the best data. It might actually all be true. Everything I read in the news might be true, but I can't believe it. So like,
I guarantee that everything you read in the news is not true, because they can't all be true. It's like
they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, there's incoherent type of statements. Yeah, so they can't all be true. I just pulled up.
Yeah, which of it is true? Some of it has to be true because they're so contradictory that
Right. So some of it's probably true and some of it's not. And what actually makes it to your eyeballs and your ears seems entirely dependent on whose agenda is kind of penetrating your information space. And so exactly right. There's no trust. I wouldn't even know who to begin to trust. Anybody who's collecting data or has the sort of scope of the scope that would be large enough to look at the data in an aggregated way is completely untrustworthy. That's probably enough to get us kicked off YouTube. Is that? I haven't named anybody. Let's see if we can get kicked off YouTube. That could be good for our show.
That could give us a boost.
Give us a boost. Yeah, I actually just pulled up. I haven't looked at it in months and months. The Worldometer. That's like the site that aggregates. It's one of the sites that aggregates everything. That's kind of organized neatly enough to click around and figure out where you're going. One of the things that someone had mentioned to me in IRL, in real life, is that cases are going up, but deaths not so much. And just from eyeballing it, it looks like that's pretty true, that our cases are increasing again, but deaths not increasing at that same proportion as they were initially. And that's really good news as far as I'm concerned. And if that data if there's veracity to that data, then that's great news. And it might be, we're not getting rid of this thing now. It's obvious. And why is that? Well, I guess maybe it's the vaccines. Maybe it's just better treatment options, better therapeutics, less uncertainty. They know that maybe intubating people is really, really, really a last resort, might even have counterproductive type effects. So maybe, maybe things are not so grim. I'd like to think so. And anyway, even if they are, with the loss of trust and the societal polarization, everything, there's no COVID policy is done. There's nothing you can really do at this point, in my opinion.
But they're still doing it.
Oh yeah. And with plenty of people who are supporting doing it, like whatever, it seems about half and half. But yeah, they're still doing it. And obviously now the rhetoric is turning mostly to vaccines, but and what to do with the people who have some doubts around the vaccines. Of course, again, just like everything with COVID, you can go back, find any politician from any side, and now they're saying the opposite of whatever they said, back when Trump was in office, basically. And so people who were optimistic about the vax are now skeptical. Those who are very pushy about it were very skeptical back then. And it's just like, from a sort of risk and probability standpoint, what's your view on the vaccines without giving any advice?
No, I mean, I think, well, so just first of all, as far as all of the discussion, at least in the media, is about, the people who refuse to get it. And what do you do with them? Well, there's nothing at this point really that you can do. You've done either those people, there's people who don't like to get vaccines in general. It has nothing to do with COVID. There's people who don't like that. And they're not going to change. And then there's people who normally probably would get it, who their brains have been so warped by all of the misinformation that they're not going to get it now because they don't trust it. So it's not like, it's like whatever chance there was to convince somebody to get something, that ship has pretty much sailed, because at this point they're trying way too hard. I mean, how many times?
That's so interesting, because you said their brain is warped by sort of the mis and disinformation, but it's not because that has worked, but because they detect that it's misinformation. They detect that it's not being delivered in a good faith way. And so they learn this is not a trustworthy source. So I'm going to either just like decouple from this, or even kind of use it as an inverse indicator. Like I'm going to do the opposite of this, which isn't necessarily a wise thing to do, but it's definitely happening.
No, so to say it's warped, that puts a little bit of a slant on it. It's not to say that it was, it's been changed in a good way or in a bad. It's that it's legitimately confusing and confounding to the point where you are either actively acting against your own interest because you've been inadvertently, the impact of the media trying to manipulate people to convince them to get it has done the exact opposite, or you're just so confused that you actually aren't in a position to make a decision. And I think that's actually a position a lot of people are in. They don't feel like they have any information to make a decision because none of the information that they have is reliable. Who do you ask?
Yeah.
Right. And you can have doctors, surgeons in your family, and you turn to one and they say get it, and you turn to the other and they say don't get it, or that they think, or it's not get it or don't get it, but here's good reasons for it, here's bad reasons for it. The thing that kind of the message behind it, and here's what really makes me get very skeptical of everything I hear. This was, since March, I've been reading about how these vaccines are what's called a leaky vaccine, which is that they don't actually kill the virus. They just mask the symptoms for the person who has the vaccine, which is fine. I mean, it's not fine. It provides a breeding ground for variants, number one. It doesn't stop the spread of the disease, but it stops the people.
When you say it provides a breeding ground, do you elaborate on that?
So this is coming from people who I trust to some extent, who I know study this stuff, and who are virus people, virologists to some extent, or epidemiologists. An ordinary disease, I think it goes something like this. If a disease was going to kill you on the spot, then it's not going to mutate, right? It gets to you, it kills you, you're dead, that's it. Now, obviously, that's not COVID. Something else would be a disease that makes you really sick, and so sick that you can't leave your house, And it might mutate while it's in your body, but you're not leaving your house because you can't move. So you're not going to spread that to anybody else.
Mhm.
Then you've got, so we already had the issue of asymptomatic spread, but now you have a vaccine that doesn't kill the virus, but it actually makes you asymptomatic. That's what the vaccine is designed to do. And so when you're asymptomatic, you're going to be all over the place, especially when you're vaccinated. You say, well, I'm safe, I'm good. And so you're still, the vaccine still lives in that person's system. It just doesn't make them feel sick. And so it
The
gives
virus.
plenty of host, not only are they now spreading it around to other people, but it's living within your own body, and it has more of a chance to survive and to mutate and to thrive into different. And basically, while it lives in the vaccinated person's body, it's trying to essentially overcome the vaccine as well. So it's trying to mutate away from what it was originally.
Well, it would only, I mean, obviously we're talking colloquially here. It's not trying to do anything, right? It's mutating because it's mutating.
Yeah, exactly.
It would actually only be a sort of, mutate potentially selectively if it did stop the spread. Otherwise, there's no selection pressure.
Sure.
So it's actually not any more or less likely. Let's assume that complete, obviously it's probably not so simple, but let's assume that the vaccine, as it were, reduces, wow, we're definitely getting kicked off YouTube.
Yeah,
let's say a thought experiment. Let's say it reduces the symptoms, but not at all the rate of infection or the transmissibility.
Yeah.
That's probably not true, but as a simple case, that would apply no evolutionary pressure one way or another. Now, it will happen as it evolves to branch out into branches that will be far enough from whatever the vaccine is selective for to indeed get around that vaccine, but that will be get around in terms of symptoms, because it can't be something else, because we said that those are the
Right.
same.
But COVID already, as I understand it, mutates a lot anyway, just by its nature.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like because there's a lot of conflation in these discussions. There's a lot of offhanded things, like things that are said offhandedly that are not careful about what is selective pressure, what does it imply about how this thing will mutate. And in fact, it's interesting because one of the things, and I bring this up over and over. So I apologize if I brought this up on the Academy before, but it's one of those things that if I do repeat myself, it's worth it. The dynamics of, like you said, if you get a disease and it kills you immediately, well, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And that would be true if I get a virus and I drop dead that second. Maybe someone comes and pokes my dead body and they get it, but barring that, like, I'm not going to spread it. So that virus has no ability to propagate into the future. This used to work on a collective scale, even on things that took a little longer to kill you. Because of spatial constraints, you would have a local extinction event of everybody infected, and it would cease the spread globally. But this breaks down completely with a small world network. So we start adding long range connections in there. You start adding long range flights everywhere. So there's actually no pressure in that sense to evolve a less deadly strain of anything, where there used to be natural kind of circuit breakers of that kind of process. Harry, you cameraed off. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Just 1 second.
All right,
I hear you though. I'm listening.
You should mute too.
No, I'm right here.
Oh, you hear me. I thought you were talking to somebody else then. Let's see. Yeah, so okay, you moved. So so evolutionary pressure stuff is really, you have to consider a lot of things, because then there's also like if you had a vaccine that was stopping infections, then you would have a kind of selective pressure that would favor certain branches of the genetic tree over others. But if the vaccine doesn't do any of that, then it doesn't pick one way or another. It doesn't pressure at all one way or another.
So I guess, but here's where it really kind of is relevant to me to the conversation people are having, which is that one is that there's all these mandates saying, you got to get it. And the argument that's been put out there from day one is it's not about whether you need to get it. It's about you protecting everybody else.
Right.
And that just isn't true about this vaccine. If
At best, it looks like it could be a reduction in how much you might spread it at best.
at best, but
Yes.
it's pretty clear that it's not, that if it's the kind of thing exactly where if I'm vaccinated, I'm protected against, maybe symptoms, but with all the breakthrough cases, people are getting sick. I'm protected against maybe severe illness or death. That seems to be the case. So it protects me, but it doesn't stop me from spreading it. It might slow it down a little bit, but it definitely doesn't stop it. So
Right.
the that the argument that it's kind of a communal kind of
Right.
benefit, it is not there.
Yes. Totally agree. There's the only, that's why I said, the best it could do is slow it down, because the best argument you could make is that, well, it still does have a communal effect. It slows it down, and maybe if everyone was vaccinated, it would slow it enough down to get R below 1, the replication rate below 1, or maybe it could be used in a set of tactics that are collectively getting R below 1. But that is a very weak argument relative to this is a silver bullet that will do it. And the fact that, it's a novel agent that we're asking people to introduce into their bodies that will certainly have side effects in some, we don't know exactly what the distribution of those are or will be. And so when you start adding, well, this is only another sort of, at best, a sort of reduction, it's sort of a chipping away at the problem, not solving the problem. And it has introducing these additional uncertainties at scale of everyone getting the same thing or one of a small number of things. You get back to systemic risk very quickly. And it's not because the vaccine is self-replicating, but it doesn't need to self-replicate because it has the agents of humans that are actually replicating. I mean, that's the production process of a vaccine, is a multiplicative process. One factory making many vials and then going into people's bodies. It's in effect, it is multiplicative, and it is at systemic scales. And so it's certainly another systemic risk you're now introducing into the system without eliminating the other systemic risks. So it's like, it seems a little nutty to me. It seems a little myopic and tunnel vision-y, but
here getting away from the systemic risk just to individual risk. I mean, here's the problem. Here's what really I think from a risk perspective, or just from a common sense or decision-making perspective, is troubling, I think, from this, is that with all the mandates and all the stuff that's going on, is that if this is a health problem or a health decision, the decision, there's a risk either way. You could say there's a risk in not getting it because I might get sick and then I'd be in a worse state than otherwise. And there's a risk in the vaccine because there's just a ton of unknown risk, and we don't know who to trust. And so there's risk there. There's a health question. But now the risk isn't simply a health one. It's, you're being ostracized from society. You're people losing their jobs because they're not doing something that's supposed to be a health decision. So basically it's coercion into making a decision that is a risky decision. And that is really, I mean, that's really the problem that's really what bothers me the most, is that it's really just coercing people to make it. I mean, this is not the situation. This is not the right kind of mindset that somebody should be in to making a decision that is apparently a difficult one.
Right.
If you've waited this long to do it, it means you don't want to do it, or it means you have misgivings about it. You have questions about it. You might want more time. You think there's questions, there's uncertainty about it. So maybe the person comes around to doing it, maybe the person doesn't. But if and when they do come around to getting it done, it would be good to be for the reason that I've thought it through and I've decided this is the best decision for me. It shouldn't be, I still don't want to do it, but if I don't do it, I'll lose my job and my kids won't be able to eat, which is actually the decision people are being forced to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously different individuals have different situations, so different amounts of pressure can be applied to them. And I just think it's interesting because already with the remote work stuff, people are choosing, for instance, to not return to the office. Like if a company is saying, you've got to come back now, a lot of people are saying, no, thanks. I'll find another opportunity. You know, the market is adaptive enough. The market's adapted. You haven't. Bye. So a lot of these policies, to me, it's kind of interesting because I agree with you that I think that they're unethical in many cases, wrong-headed in many cases. But they believe that what they're doing is nudging, right? We're like living in the nudge reality now. We've like gone full nudge. And what's funny is there is a virtue to the nudge over the just kind of overt coercion. And it's something that I hadn't really thought about before this, but the nudge does leave room. And that means that the sort of limited view of their model, like they're very confident that this will be enough of a nudge to get people to do what we want. But for many people, they're much more stubborn than their models have assumed. And this stubborn set of people are going to seek a different alternative, one that's totally outside that model. And I just see over and over these COVID nudge policies, especially the vax stuff, are actually pushing us towards, well, one, a continued divide in society, like group A, group B, totally separate, kind of segregated society, but not just purely segregated, actually a more local lifestyle is going to be something that is necessarily adopted if you, for instance, are stubborn, don't want to vax and can't get on a plane, are stubborn, don't want to vax, can't get on a train. Maybe state borders start checking and having preference over that. Cities already are having that kind of thing. So now you're having policies that are telling people, no, actually your movement is limited. And the most obvious answer for people that are stubborn that way is, okay, I'm going to localize my life now. So you're getting this bifurcation of society, and you're also getting people nudged towards exactly what they don't want. They want this global world where everyone's kind of in the category of consumer, properly vaccinated, accounted for, tabulated consumer, and sort of you can move about and buy whatever you want and sort of purchase experiences and all that. So, it's a little white pill silver lining in it for me, in that, sorry to say white pill, it's very internet speak of me, but it's a little silver lining for me in that I see the catalyst of localism in all of their actions. Everything that's supposed to drive us towards the opposite simultaneously drives a localist type of behavior in a different stubborn group of people. So I'll be interested to see if that plays out. If people are really stubborn, probably they just drop the policies and it fails totally. It's not like the US government can't fail totally, right? They certainly can. And so, I don't know which way we'll go, but there is a silver lining in those, in what is ultimately unethical policy.
Well, the silver lining is one that, it is, I guess you can say it's a silver lining, but it's a silver lining because it's destroying, they're destroying what they think they're preserving. And so obviously,
you think they think they're preserving, or are they creating? I get the sense they think they're creating the next system.
I'm sure that there's some it depends where you are, where you are, right. Because sure. I'm sure there's people who are thinking, trying to pull the strings like that. But a lot, I think, the bureaucrats primarily, and the people who are, somewhere in the middle of this, who are implementing, and not only implementing, but also kind of carrying out or enforcing the policies that they didn't come up with, have been convinced, or at least have convinced themselves, that this is the right thing to do to get back to normal, quote unquote, right? To preserve what we had before, or whatever.
It's hard for me to believe that anyone is of that mindset anymore. Like we're so far from that, and none of the things that are supposed to get us towards that, they all make things weirder, not more normal. And so it's hard for me to think that anyone thinks that anymore.
Thinks that what? That
what we're doing is working our way back to how things used to be.
Well, first of all, I don't even know what that means. What did things used to be? Going back to the 2016 to 2020 era, that would be nice, but that's probably not the case.
Well, yeah, I think for most people that looks very normal now. They didn't think so then, but I think that looks very normal to people now. And So yes, just sort of within the US, I mean, the culture of you get on a plane if you feel like it, you
Yeah.
go to the ballpark if you feel like it, you talk to whoever the hell you want, um,
I mean,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. And obviously they are trying to frame it as back to normal, but it's, if you got to show your QR code to walk into the restaurant, and not as any kind of, it's not because I've reserved a seat or something. It's because I'm being checked as a human being. It's like a TSA checkpoint at the Chili's. Like that's, I don't think that most people think that's normal, even people that are willing to indulge.
No, I think that, so there, it's interesting because throughout all this, I mean, there was a short period where I was kind of locked in my house like everybody else. But beyond that, I really have not felt too different because I've been around people and been around things and done things, and things, if things are shut down, I can't do them, of course. But the people that I interact with are, I still have interacted with them, and but then there's the other group, and then of course there's the group of people I'm forgetting, I guess, who I used to interact with, who I haven't, because they're not mixing, they're not leaving their house, or they're more concerned to go out, and that's their choice. But I mean, in some sense, it has kind of, like you're saying, it has actually bifurcated people. And it's, there are people now who I guess are, in some sense, are willing to create this new normal where you have to be so careful before you go out and do anything. But there are a lot of people who are just basically, and not to say either one is right, although I don't think that checking everybody's papers before they go to get a cup of coffee is where we want to go. But there's people who are kind of doing their own thing, one way or the other. But no, yeah, I guess you said earlier that you didn't, who would think we would look back the last 4 years as a period of normality, but who would think we would look back the last 4 years as a period of stability?
Right.
That's kind of, it's kind of, that's and I think it's really the tip of the iceberg in that regard. It has to be.
So it's the tip of the iceberg. So that's kind of what I'm saying, though. It's hard. It's really hard for me to imagine that there's people who believe that we're going back in some sense. It's like, yeah, what does that mean, going back? But in any sense, it's, and there probably are. Just because it's hard for me to believe doesn't mean that there isn't at all. There's a lot of shit there's a lot of stuff out there. It's hard for me to believe, but
what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that maybe, and I wasn't really part of this group of people necessarily, but I believe there is like a large percentage of people, I'm talking about in this country, might be 25%, might be 40, for which, for the most part, nothing changed for them over the past 2 years. Like, they don't live in the Northeast or on the East or West Coast. So they weren't like, yeah, a few things here and there, but like there's states for which things shut down for like 2 weeks and then they've been open ever since.
I mean, that's pretty much New Hampshire. I mean, nothing
So,
much changed here. And as we came into like the summer of 2020 and all that, and the numbers were very, very low here. You drive into town and everything was normal, and not many people had a couple of places did go out of business, and it's pretty sad that they did, because there were places that were in town for a long time and all that, but most places didn't. And so I agree, like there is definitely this whole section of society who actually didn't experience almost anything directly, just sort of all in terms of the info space and the chatter online. And a lot of it is that for me too. A lot of it is internet chatter that I'm exposed to. And so I become aware of, well, for one thing, what's going on elsewhere that's different. But another thing is you start to become aware of sort of agendas and intentions, and where various, whether it's political factions or oligarchs of various sorts, where they are like trying to push things, never mind where they are today, but where like they're trying to take them, trying to use the current situation as sort of a leverage point to take them there. And so that's like where a lot of, I feel like that social polarization is coming from, is really not that things are so different today, but that you can feel in the air how different they want them to be, and soon. And so maybe I'm just paranoid, but that's like what seems to be the atmosphere. And it's hard to, like, yeah, you could just say, you know what, I'm going to turn this off. None of this is actually happening around me, so I'm going to turn this off. But it's kind of like, you know, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. And it's like, okay, if I just kind of turn off, how many years, how many months are we talking about before all of a sudden I'm driving into town, and in fact things are different now, and in fact there is a checkpoint, and I'm now showing my my QR codes and whatnot. Like, if I don't pay attention, if I don't, like, you know, make it known that there's a portion of society that's very much not going to go along with this happily, then, you know, am I doing myself a disservice by checking out? Because I've definitely thought about, you know, maybe I should just kind of like, and that's like what we were saying in the beginning, I kind of done that with COVID data. Like, maybe I want to check out of all of this stuff too, and just not pay attention. And if I, you know, if my cabin was a bit deeper into the woods on top of a mountain, maybe I could do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's there's the desire to there is kind of there's almost a need to have the option to check out, because maybe not quite yet, but there's a future in which that's your only option, in which it becomes
The
irreversible.
whole thing though is checking out becomes, the more closer we get to that future, the harder checking out becomes.
Yeah,
They don't, checking out is like that's not what, you know, the system. And when I say this stuff, you know, this is not because some guy sitting in his office says you can't let people check out, but there's a system level kind of intention that manifests, and the system actually wants to keep you engaged in the system, and it doesn't want you to check out and isolate and stuff. I mean, you can look at various events in not too distant memory that you know, they don't like people who check out. Groups of people, individuals even, checking out is not favored. I agree. I mean, not my whole life, a big portion of my life is trying to figure out, you know, what that would look like. And so I'm certainly in favor of cultivating the option. It's just so hard to know it's hard for me to draw that line between checking out and sort of trying to build an option versus like pushing back in a more explicit manner and just trying to nip it all in the bud.
Yeah, so the pushing back, I mean, that this is, you know, I guess you can think about, I mean, there's at this point seems like there's so many strange things happening that are in parallel, that are like the mandates are one of a number of things happening in parallel that are in this same direction, right? And this is where it's kind of all, it feels like it's all going to consolidate at some point, and it's going to be some, I mean, I guess that's where the, like, checking out really just means disengaging from society and letting it all happen, which would be hard to do given, you know, we're basically giving up, you're basically giving up any, you know, control of, you know, any freedom or any control of your own life that you want to have, except for on your little plot of land wherever you happen to be.
But even then, I mean, to be on your little plot of land, I mean, are you going to build walls? Are you going to, you know, what about when the drones scan what you're doing? Or is everything going to be under tree cover? And, you know, what if you're not supposed to, you know, farm animals without a license? And all of this, you roll your, yeah, I know. Don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. You know,
of course.
Impossible burgers are the only option, you know?
In Bill Gates's world.
Yeah. There is an agenda. I don't believe that agenda will succeed. Yeah, and I repeat myself on this one over and over too, and I'll repeat myself again. I don't believe that, I will kind of cast them as the centralizers. And I cast them that way because there's not just one cabal or one small thing, or one shadowy figure like pulling all the strings, but there is a de facto alliance of those who wish to centralize the system. I don't believe that what they want to achieve is even possible. The reason that doesn't give me peace of mind is because of how much freaking turmoil and damage they can cause trying to achieve their impossible ends.
Yeah. But so we're in a point so where, there's certain things that a friend of mine mentioned this to me the other day. Like there's certain things that like their failure only makes them more perpetual.
Mhm.
Like bureaucracy is a great example. The failure of bureaucracy only creates the need for a bigger bureaucracy. And
it's justification for one. It's like, well, clearly the bureaucracy was not big enough, otherwise it would not have failed.
Right. In the case of like I guess talking about the vaccines is one, as we get more breakthrough cases, well, obviously what we need is another booster shot.
Right.
When the lockdowns aren't working, well, obviously what we need are more lockdowns, or, people shouldn't, or, social distancing didn't work. So we have to lock people in their houses or whatever. So that's like the centralization, the control side of things. And there's people who I guess what kind of also is scary is that there's the people who are on the top trying to, implement these policies, and they're a huge part of the problem. They're creating the problem, but they're in principle, they know what they're doing. And it's not what me or you might want them to be doing, or it's not the direction we want to be headed, but it is the direction they want to be headed.
Right.
But then there's everybody, it's so kind of nefarious in a way, because the way that it is presented and it's people buy into it, right? Which is, well, it's more convenient this way. If everything's just centralized, I don't have to worry about anything. Also, you're doing this for my own good. It's for my own health. If we all just did this, if we all just got in this together, we would all be better off. So there's this whole veneer on it, which I think is what makes it much more compelling. And I think it's going to continue it maintains its steam because the alternative hasn't really been presented in as compelling of a way, because it gets presented as such or at least it gets whether it's misrepresented, but as this individualistic or selfish type of way of doing things, which it isn't, but that's how it is.
There is a huge, there is a significant, I don't know if to say proportion of people, there's a voice in the discussion that is significant in the public voice that is sort of on the selfish side of things, at least in how it's articulated its own position, which is sort of like, it's this pure reactive kind of leave me alone kind of reaction. And I'm very, I have the leave me alone reaction a lot. So I'm sympathetic to that. But it is about the individual, leave me alone, or the family, leave us alone, or something like that. And like you're saying, it fails to offer, like, aside from sort of a negative, don't do that, it fails to offer anything about like, well, how can things go differently? And it's just, it seems, in my opinion, I really hate using political terms because I just feel like I need to qualify every little fucking thing. But, I don't know whether to say Republicans or conservatives or what, but basically those who are not of the kind of progressive slant, I believe really shot, I'll say ourselves, because I don't consider myself progressive, although in some ways maybe I am, shot ourselves in the foot by focusing on, you're tyrannical, you're imposing on my freedoms, you're doing this to me, you need to stop doing this to me, and not like looking at the problem and looking at, say, our own value systems and figuring out where do potential solutions lie at the intersection of these. To me, the most obvious thing, and which I think has been actually to date the most effective thing, is border control. Is you control what flows into some subset of the system. Yeah, there's going to be an error rate. You're not going to catch everything, but it's an opportunity to catch a lot. And to me, if that it was like we had President Border Wall, and yet, so the kind of New World Order, kind of Brave New World stuff that they're trying to usher in, I'm not in favor of it, but it's easy to see how they win the kind of bureaucratic political game by having very specific policies they want to push this policy, push this policy, push this policy. What's the other side's policy? It's like, leave me alone.
Well, it does get to this bureaucracy thing, because if the solution is always we need more bureaucracy, or we need more government, we need more policy, and the policies that they put in are always destined to fail, and therefore you need more policy, and you need, it's not that there's anything wrong with the approach. It's just that, oh, well, we'll try better next time. We'll put a better policy in place next time. I mean, the border control one is an example, which is, from a purely logical standpoint, if you shut the borders down completely, nothing's getting in. But they never did that. You shut down flights from China, but if you can fly in from France, what's the difference? And it's, oh, well, the people in this place happen to be sick now, so let's shut it down to people who are coming from there. It's just this, I mean, it's destined to just proliferate this thing forever. I mean, we're now at the point where it's not going away, right? And the arguments out there that, talking about COVID, right? I mean, I don't see a world in which this disappears. Do you?
No, and I could see a world in where it, in principle, could disappear, but the realities of the world we live in now is absolutely no. Am I coming through okay? It says my internet connection is unstable.
It got bad for a second.
Okay.
You might be okay now. Yeah.
So no, I agree with you. It's not going anywhere. And the thing is, if you were like, under what conditions could it go somewhere? Well, if you really had a large enough group of people in a large enough landmass with enough resources where you're basically like self-sustaining, kind of like an autarkic scenario, you could make it go away. You could get to go away, but literally that does mean like stop most flow of people coming in. And the smaller that radius is, the more likely you could get it to go away. But in this world, is that happening? No. So all of that discussion is sort of like fanciful. And so I agree with you, it's not going away.
So I mean, if you think about it from a common sense point of view and just from a purely objective point of view, I mean, that's the conclusion I think you come to. There's just, it's not going away, but so that doesn't mean give up, but it does mean this is now the playing field, and think about how to manage that problem or solve that problem to the best we can. But we're still being sold that end goal of this is the only way that we get rid of that. We get.
I actually haven't seen the end goal. There's not clear statements about the end goal that I've seen coming from say the federal government or
maybe not the government. I haven't followed what they're saying, but I've seen.
I do follow what the government says. I don't follow the data, so to speak. But
I don't follow what anyone says except in randomly I do see things. So for example, I mean, this is what the universities are mandating all kinds of things now, and I'm seeing individual universities saying the only way that we can eradicate COVID is if everybody gets the vaccine. The vaccines are the only way out of this, which is not only a misunderstanding, it's just not true. But to think that you can also solve this global problem by having everybody on your campus do one very specific thing is also very naive, but it's the way of convincing people and getting people in this locality to do something.
Are they explicitly saying, and this will eliminate the virus?
I'll try to find the exact wording.
Because I haven't got any of that messaging that's a stated or even an implicit goal at this point. In fact, I don't see a goal. I see that there is a new standard of behavior that's being expected, but it's not clear what that is believed to achieve with respect to COVID. It seems much more like there is a belief that vaccines in general, the rapid development and deployment of new vaccines, is a way of dealing with human disease in a very connected society. Mm-hmm. And this is all me inferring from the things they do say and things they do put out. It's not really about COVID in that sense. It's about getting everyone it's about COVID, sort of like this will help with COVID, and this is now the way we're going to do things. Sort of regular schedule of vaccines for everyone, and as new things crop up, new vaccines, sort of this global organism type of model where we all get sick together and cured together.
So here's the statement. This is from, I mean, this is a new thing. This is very specific. This is from Duke, who just passed a mandate, which they're firing anybody who doesn't get the vaccine by October 1st.
They should all get together and make
another
university, something.
Vaccination is the best way to protect yourself and your loved ones from serious illness related to COVID-19. And it is the only way we will bring an end to this pandemic.
Bring an end to this pandemic. See, that is not a stated goal about what the fate of the virus will be. Like the end of the pandemic, to me, the pandemic is just as much a social phenomenon as it is a kind of.
Well, it is. I mean, I see what you're saying. Although that's really carefully chosen words in that case, because that's not. I mean, the pandemic is also something it's a social phenomenon. It's also kind of an official declaration of the World Health Organization, right? They declare something a pandemic or not, right?
So then, exactly, everyone can get vaccinated. COVID's still circulating, but World Health Organization can declare an end to the pandemic.
Yeah, exactly, and we can go back to our normal lives.
Right.
Well, our life. Well, we can
participate in society.
Right. But only because the restrictions have been lifted, not because of any, not because
let's like recap real quick. Like basically there's not a good solid collective case for vaccines anymore. There could have been under certain conditions, there's not now. So this has devolved to an individual type of risk profile. And then, with known statistics, you have to look and decide is the risk worth it for me. One thing we haven't hit on is the immunity issue of acquired immunity, whether natural immunity versus spike protein immunity. And there's, for me, it was funny that people were talking about it as news, because I had actually just assumed from my understanding of the immune system that, if you develop immunity to a specific spike protein, of course your immunity is much more narrow. The time course wasn't necessarily following from that, but at least the narrowness follows pretty directly from that. And that's one thing we didn't hit on yet. So figures throw it in the kitchen sink there. But
that makes exactly.
But ultimately, like, this is an individual decision now in terms of a risk profile, and the idea of mandating it on any level. I mean, private business is okay. I get it. Like, I don't want to, like, you have a certain thing you want to do. I'm not trying to impose on you, but the private businesses are, especially the large corporations, are starting to act as an arm of the government. And so we have this like really nasty situation where all of a sudden things that were up until many months ago, 4 months ago, I don't know, 4 months ago, were considered universally as like private health information, decision-making. It seems like half the population is just on board with like everyone should have their status tattooed on their forehead, and then we make decisions on what to do with you based on it. And it's pretty fucking scary in those regards. And that seems to be, like, at this point, just as much of a risk as the biological risk of the virus. And I feel like a little bit almost embarrassed to say so, because there's people that were like very early on in the pandemic saying, the state is as much or more of a risk than the virus. Like, the solution is worse than the disease. And I was someone who very adamantly pushed back on that and said, no, like the disease is worse because we don't know what the hell is going on. And so if you look at it in a distributional sense, the tail of the disease is fucking crazy. But here we are, and the problem is that the uncertainty has been collapsing all these months. But the policies are as if that hasn't happened.
Well, that's the thing. So there was a period of time, and I think it was a relatively short period of time, but I would say there was a period for me of about 2 months where the physical threat of the virus exceeded these concerns about other things. And that was, to me, by the end of April of however many years ago, and middle of May, and it was still serious at that time, but still, it started to feel like, okay, this doesn't appear to be something that's going to just kill everyone on site. We have to be a little bit more reasonable about this. But that hasn't, but it's almost like, I guess the people who were saying, the government overreach stuff, they were concerned about it because I guess once the overreach starts, it doesn't just stop the day that things become clear. It continues indefinitely. And here we are today. Right. I mean, today it's hard to really, I mean, we're still talking about this. That's what's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That is mind blowing. So what do you think? Like, what do you think that we ought to do?
I mean, you, or what we,
I sort of meant in sort of a global kind of policy sense, but it could be more local.
There's no, it's impossible to say what we as a global, because everything's so messed up. But like what,
so just let's talk about like the USA, like
what I've already
state
seen,
level.
Like I'm saying, I see people I know, with very few exceptions, they're back to life. They're getting back to some semblance of normal life. And I still hear about people who aren't doing that and who are afraid to leave their houses and stuff like that. And I guess I was at this point a year and a half ago. I was saying, if you want to leave your house, great. If you're afraid to leave your house, okay. And that choice has to be, at this point, the data is out there. So you don't want to look at data, but the information is out there. The data is out there, and you can't trust anybody to deliver the decision for you at this point, clearly. So everyone has, I mean, there's no option but to make the call for yourself. You have no other option.
Then your policy, if you could set policy, your policy would be no policy.
My policy, I think that, this actually, to what you said earlier, I guess this does get to your local policy making, which is, that's the only solution to this, because the only people who actually know what's going on in their own, what's going on and how things affect them, are at this most minuscule level you can think of, right? There's no way I can say from everybody in the country should lock their doors and not leave, or everybody in the country should run out and just do whatever they want tomorrow.
Yeah.
That doesn't work that way. That's what we've learned from this, if anything.
So, I mean, what we're seeing now is that, and this was always, a possibility, and now it's the reality, is that it's because it's endemic, much like we have the flu season.
Yeah.
We have these kind of weather. It's kind of like weather. It's like viral weather. Sometimes it's raining outside, sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes COVID is all around, sometimes it's not so much. And, in an adaptive sense, for policy and just personal behavior, otherwise, it makes sense to react to the weather. And actually, that's where it's so annoying that all of these things have been so politically captured, where your tribe and your position on any given policy is sort of perfectly determined. But I wish that I actually think that people donning masks on a voluntary basis during whether it's flu season or whatever, especially like where I live in New England, where in the winter everything is closed up, everyone's breathing the same air, everyone's getting the flu, everyone's now getting COVID. Like, I wish that masks were like normalized to the point that you'd look at someone with a mask in a store and you'd have no idea, is this a Democrat, progressive, conservative, Republican? Is this person concerned for others? Are they worried about themselves? Are they wearing this mask because maybe there's something totally else going on with them that has nothing to do with any of this shit? Like, I think that's where masks should go. I think that the cowboy, like, I'm never gonna put on a mask because that's that's compliance. Like, that's fucking like stupid way to think. Because there's a right place for these things, and all of these things, even like, honestly, even lockdowns. And I say that and that should be a last resort and used minimally and acutely, but even lockdowns have a proper place. And so this sort of like things outside of any established context make no sense. You can't say this is good, this is bad. It needs a context to sit in. And now the context with COVID is that it's endemic, it's like weather, it's local conditions, and people understand enough the risks from just an intuitive level and a perceptual level to make their own call, like we've done with every other virus up until this point, or maybe,
Yeah,
maybe not Spanish flu or something, but
and unfortunately, I mean, I think it should be at that level. I don't think we actually are in the position where people can make their own call, because I think people still have a very strong disagreement as to the level, and I don't know the answer. Is this really, really, really serious and I should be really, really scared? Or is this not a big deal? And
okay, so my view is this, like, for one, obviously you can look at demographic stuff and get a sense of that on an individual level. But the other thing is, what we still just don't know, and we can't pretend to know for some time to come, is whether something that seems like not a big deal now turns into chronic long-term problems going forward. And we just don't know the answer to that. And so on some level, you have to just kind of not calculate anything, but make a decision and go forward.
Well, I mean, I think that, this, if anything, has, I mean, a lot of people have probably had a lot of time to think and kind of, how do you approach your life, right? And I guess from that point of view, the way I look at it is, you only have, I mean, today is the only thing you have left in principle, and you have to decide what to do. Do you want to lock yourself down for today in favor of tomorrow? Or, after you do that, and, you're willing to do that for a certain period of time, but after a while you start to think, well, there's not so many days left. I'm running out of time here, and you're locking yourself down for
acute and
something
chronic. It makes sense to stay home for a day.
Yeah.
It makes sense to stay home for a week. Maybe it makes sense to stay home for a month, but it certainly doesn't make sense to stay home for 18 months, 2 years. You just start to go, okay, well, there's no life anymore. Like,
exactly. And the thing about the mask, or the cowboy who doesn't wear a mask.
I don't mind if the cowboy doesn't wear a mask.
No.
What I was objecting to was the idea that if the cowboy did wear a mask, he would no longer be a cowboy, right? Like,
no,
that's
exactly.
how it invalidates.
No, exactly. And the thing about that is like, in principle, you say lockdowns, masks, all these things, you have a problem, all hands on deck, all solutions on the table. And if you have the tool, you use it in the right situation. The situation we're in is that people don't trust the people in charge to use the tools they have for the right reasons. And that's what confuses, it leads people to make these, they're stubborn choices. They're against their own interest, even, because
everything turns into signaling, and then you get like, immediately as you turn into signaling, you get the polarization, because you get like, you get someone in the middle of whatever it is on top of Mount Olympia wearing a mask, right? And then you get someone, and then they say, well, look at that guy's out in the middle of nowhere. There's not another human in 1,000 miles. He's wearing a fucking mask for COVID. Like, this shit is ridiculous. I'm not participating. And then boom, polarity.
Exactly. It becomes an association thing. There's people who don't want to associate with the cowboy, and there's people who don't want to associate with the person who's scared to death.
That's why one of the best things that happened in this whole thing, and I wish that it clung around a little longer than it ended up, was when Biden came out, I guess on Twitter, maybe elsewhere, and said, great, if you have your vaccine now, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. And this threw a complete like shuffle into the signaling, because it was like, wait, but
right.
How do I signal? And I was like, yes, this is like the best thing that could happen. And it actually, for a couple of weeks, it did kind of mix that up, but then it sorted itself back out into, no vax, no mask, mask vax.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean,
I just don't want to live in any world where you can just kind of fucking look at someone and exactly everything about their politics. Like, I want to like get rid of that world. I'm like so done with it.
Yeah, no, that's but if only, right? I mean, it's crazy.
I guess I think it's possible. I don't think that it needs to be like this.
No, but I think that, I mean, unfortunately, I think that there's a long way to go. maybe not a long way to go. It could be short and sweet. Well, short and not so sweet, but I
Yeah,
think that
right.
there's quite a bit of turmoil
Yes.
lying ahead.
Yes.
So that's the lesson of this academy. We're still talking about COVID and math.
Yeah, we're still talking about COVID. Build your options for the coming turmoil, whatever it is.
So you got to get ready. So we should wrap this up anyway. It's been about an hour, but you got to get ready for your class, which is starting. When are you
Yeah,
starting?
yeah, yeah. Another round of the class is starting in a couple weeks here, 2 weeks. I'm pretty excited. This is going to be another good one, I'm sure. And yeah, just
Maybe I'll drop by a couple just to sit in and listen and
you're certainly welcome to. I hope you come
learn a
back
thing or
and
two.
we can talk the probability stuff too for a
Be happy to
session.
do that. And like I've been dragging my feet on doing my own thing, doing a version of my own. But one of these days, maybe I will.
No, I mean, you did the gambling thing. I know
Yeah,
I know you
no,
did something
that
different.
was good. No, that was good, I guess. But maybe even expanding the repertoire a
Think
bit.
about that. You made however many 70 people. You made them very wealthy. They're now they're now set for
Now,
life. I'm sure. I mean, that
you
you
know
didn't
what
say
they
that, but
are,
I think that's probably
and it's
true.
relevant to the conversation we've been having. They are at least in a position to independently make money. Whether it's a
Right.
lot or little is another question, but they do have another source of income.
That's interesting, right?
And you can't,
How far does society have to collapse before betting stops? Like, is that pretty low down, or is that at the tip? I don't know. I don't have a sense. I'm not in that world.
well, the problem actually, what's happening with betting is it's all becoming regulated now, the sports betting. It's not making it better. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
It's actually making it worse from a lot of
Let me guess. It's consolidating the capital into fewer and fewer hands.
and it's more mouths to feed, right? The regulators, they love to put rules in place. So betting has been around for thousands and thousands of years. That's never going away. But the regulated, centralized betting, yeah, that can, that'll be around as long as there's tax revenue to be collected. That's the
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be right down there. The betting will exist right before the last.
You'll have legalized drugs and gambling for as long as there's government bureaucrats who need salaries.
And then after that, it will go back to a more organic, games of jacks or something, whatever you do. So
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, that was a fun class. I mean, you know what? If anything, I worked so hard, did so much work for that class. We ran it over the summer that I didn't have time to. There were weeks and maybe even a month or two where I would look at Twitter for like a few minutes a day and then just be like, "What am I doing? Just get out of here." And
we felt it. We felt the absence.
it was nice,
Sure.
though, I have to say. But I had been kind of slowing down my Twitter appetite, which is not a bad thing. But it's I'm sure you have this. It's good and bad. It keeps me kind of connected. There's a lot of I've met every interesting and good person in my life through Twitter over the past 4 or 5 years.
Isn't that amazing? I've same for me, and I always try my best, and not everybody obviously, but try my best to actually meet up in person with folks. And a couple of weeks ago, we got to meet like a few folks who are kind of in the homesteading scene on Twitter, and all get together. And someone brought their own lamb they butchered the night before. And people brought meat from their farms and vegetables from their farms, and it was awesome. And it was just like, wow, Twitter is extremely powerful. Like this is a real group of people. It's like we're pretty spread out geographically, but not that spread out. And this is like a community that's emerged out of this complete. And what was so interesting is I remember back in the day when I was younger, like I'm internet native, whatever, right? So I've been meeting people from friends on the internet for a long time, but it used to be that like you kind of didn't have a feel exactly how the person was, and like maybe it's a little awkward, like switching between the mediums. But now the density of the communication, there's such a density to it, and something about the I don't know, something about Twitter especially, the nature of it, and the conversations sort of back and forthing that goes on. You get to know people, you really do, and you know that you do when you meet them in real life, and there's nothing surprising about them.
Yeah.
Even if you've never seen their face, you're like completely like old friends. Yeah, Twitter is amazing for that.
So, I try to keep that. I mean, I've gone to great lengths to kind of curate my, um, my interactions there to the point where, I unfollow people routinely, not
I know
because
you
they're,
unfollowed me, and I was like, I guess
did I
I'll
really? Wait, seriously?
I did nothing. No, I was fucking with you.
I mean, it's possible. That would have been that would have been an accident, but just to try to cut down on like, I don't need to know about like this, the complaints that people from this community are having, or the feuds that they're, just keep it to things that are actually not to say important, but just interesting to me, and just people who are agreeable to me.
Well, honestly, that's one of the reasons I block like crazy, is because you know that feeling, everyone knows it. Like it's something gets to you like and honestly, what I've trained myself to do is that feeling is a block.
Mhm.
And that does 95+% of what I needed to in terms of like Twitter feeling like something I walk away with, like with negative feelings.
Yeah, no, that's important because there is a lot of negativity. So,
Oh man, and you feel it. I mean, it's like it gets to you, but it doesn't need to like keep like when that would be my recommendation to anyone watching the Academy, is if the moment you get that sort of gut level, like just block that person and don't look and just don't engage with them ever again. That's it. And your Twitter life will be like improved thousands and thousands of %. You don't owe anyone shit on Twitter. And that's one of the things that's crazy to me, is people feel like they owe people something. You got to go. We're wrapping up.
till next time.
Till next time. Cheers, my friend.
All right.